Chernobyl, the day the world held its breath. In the early hours of April 26, 1986, a nuclear power experiment was set in motion that would spiral into the worst man-made disaster in human history. Deep within the Soviet Union, the number 4th reactor of the Chernobyl nuclear power plant, a symbol of Soviet industrial prowess, exploded, releasing radioactive material across Europe. Located just 3 kilometers from the thriving city of Pripyat, the plant employed thousands and powered millions of homes across Ukraine. But it was built on a flawed foundation, both literally and scientifically. The RBMK 1000 reactor design, used only in the Soviet Union, had a dangerously positive void coefficient and lacked a proper containment structure, a flaw that would soon prove catastrophic. This wasn't just an accident. It was the result of human error, institutional denial, and systemic flaws hidden behind the Iron Curtain. When reactor number 4 exploded, the world changed forever. Not with a bang of war, but with the silence of decay and dust. The reactor was scheduled to undergo a safety test, ironically, one meant to prepare for emergencies. The goal was to see whether the momentum of the turbine could power essential cooling pumps during a blackout. But delays pushed the test into the night, leaving it in the hands of an inexperienced crew. As the test began, reactor power dropped too low, far below the safe threshold of 700 megawatts. Xenon-135, a fission byproduct that absorbs neutrons, accumulated in the core, choking the reaction. This phenomenon, known as xenon poisoning, was known but poorly understood by the operators on duty. In response, the operators removed most of the control rods to regain power. They violated regulations and approached a dangerously unstable configuration, with fewer than the minimum 15 rods inserted. But the test continued. Safety was ignored. Warnings were dismissed. Pressure to complete the test overrode caution. RBMK reactors become more reactive as water turns to steam, a design flaw known as a positive void coefficient. Instead of dampening the reaction, boiling water accelerated it. And in this unstable condition, the scram, the emergency shutdown, would prove fatal. At exactly 1:23:40 a.m., the AZ5 button was pressed. Intended to shut down the reactor, it initiated the opposite. Due to flawed design, the graphite tips on the control rods increased reactivity for the first moments of insertion. A massive power surge followed. The reactor's output spiked uncontrollably, boiling coolant within seconds. Fuel channels ruptured. The reactor vessel exploded. Then, a second explosion, even more violent, tore through the reactor hull, launching debris and radioactive fuel into the night sky. The upper biological shield, weighing over 2,000 tons, was hurled into the air. Graphite moderator blocks, glowing hot, rained down across the plant. The reactor core was open to the atmosphere. Radioactive particles were already drifting into the wind. Minutes after the explosion, firefighters from Pripyat arrived. None of them had protective suits, radiation meters, or warnings. They thought they were battling a routine electrical fire. By morning, many of them were in the hospital. They were vomiting, their skin blistering. They had walked into the equivalent of a nuclear battlefield, without armor. 28 of them died in the following weeks. Others survived, but carried the physical and emotional scars for life. They were the first heroes of Chernobyl, and the first victims. While reactor number 4 lay in ruins, the nearby city of Pripyat remained unaware. That morning, children went to school, couples got married, fishermen cast their lines into the Pripyat River, under a sky heavy with radioactive dust. By midday, radiation levels were off the charts, yet no warning was issued. The Soviet government remained silent, not out of ignorance, but out of fear. Fear of panic, fear of global embarrassment, fear of exposing failure. 36 hours later, evacuation was finally ordered. The announcement was calm, almost casual. Pack a small bag. You'll be back in a few days. But those buses rolled out forever. Families left homes, pets, photos, everything. Pripyat, once a model Soviet city of 50,000, became a ghost town overnight. Nature would take it back, but human life never returned. It wasn't the Soviet Union that alerted the world, it was Sweden. On April 28th, radiation detectors at the Forsmark nuclear plant triggered alarms, but their reactors were fine. Something was very wrong elsewhere. Only then, under international pressure, did the Soviet Union admit that an incident had occurred. But it wasn't an incident. It was the largest release of radiation in history. Radioactive fallout drifted over 200,000 square kilometers, contaminating parts of Ukraine, Belarus, Russia, and stretching as far as Scandinavia, France, and even the UK. Crops were destroyed. Livestock had to be slaughtered. Milk in many regions became unsafe to drink. Wild animals began to carry radioactive isotopes in their flesh. Some still do to this day. The Soviet response was massive. Over 600,000 people, known as liquidators, were deployed to clean up the mess. They were soldiers, miners, engineers, and volunteers. Most had little idea what they were walking into. When the radiation fried the circuits of cleanup robots, the Soviet Union sent men. Men who shoveled burning graphite off rooftops in 90-second shifts. They were told it was safe. It wasn't. They dug under the reactor to build a cooling platform. They flew helicopters overhead, dumping sand, lead, and boron into the fire. Some didn't live long enough to see their medals. Their sacrifice prevented an even greater catastrophe. If the reactor had melted into the groundwater, it could have poisoned the entire Dnieper River basin, the water supply for millions. With the fire finally out, the world faced a new problem: how to contain an open reactor core still emitting deadly radiation. The answer came in the form of a hastily built sarcophagus, a concrete and steel structure thrown together in just 206 days under extreme radiation levels. It was a desperate effort, and a temporary one. Cracks appeared within years. The structure, never designed to last, began to decay. A collapse would mean renewed radioactive release. So, in 2016, after 2 decades of planning, the world built the largest movable structure in human history, the new safe confinement. At 108 meters high and 36,000 tons, it was slid over the ruins like a giant tomb. Underneath that shell lies over 200 tons of radioactive lava, known as corium, mixed with uranium, graphite, and melted steel. One infamous chunk, called the elephant's foot, was once so deadly it could kill within minutes. Today, it's decaying, slowly, silently. Chernobyl changed the Earth. Over 2,600 square kilometers remain in the exclusion zone. Forests reclaimed the cities. Wolves, bears, and lynx now roam the ruins. Nature returned, but it returned radioactive. Yet the damage wasn't just ecological. In Belarus, Ukraine, and Russia, thousands of children developed thyroid cancer from iodine-131 exposure. The total death toll is still debated. Some say 4,000, others over 90,000. Panic spread across Europe. In Italy, Germany, and Sweden, nuclear plants were shut down. In Norway and the UK, sheep were monitored for radioactive cesium, even decades later. In the Alps, mushrooms still glow hotter than acceptable, and in the shadow of the sarcophagus, silent observers remained. The Samoseli, elderly villagers who returned to their homes in the exclusion zone. Against warnings, they chose to live and die in the land they loved. Chernobyl was a disaster born from secrets, from denial, from a system that silenced truth and punished questions. But it left behind a message in radioactive dust: the cost of arrogance. Yet it also gave us heroes: the firefighters, the liquidators, the scientists who risked everything. Some gave their lives, others gave the truth. Today, Chernobyl is more than a ruin. It is a warning written in stone and steel that the invisible atom holds power both for light and for ruin. What we do with it is up to us. The silence of Chernobyl still speaks. Will we listen?